under the circumstances. It's a common greeting that we all use, how are you doing? And it's a common response for people to say, I'm fine under the circumstances. Now we know that circumstances can be unchangeable, uncontrollable, and unbearable. Last Sunday in part 1 of this message, I gave you 2 points. The first one was this: remove yourself from under that set of circumstances. There are some circumstances that will lead you to a wrong decision, as with the Apostle Peter, and that is a denial. The wrong set of circumstances that you get yourself under can lead you to a bad decision that can alter your life forever. With him, it was a denial. The second point, I made this statement: remove yourself from under those set of circumstances. Just come out from under them. Your circumstances don't control you. Your circumstances don't control you. When you can't control your circumstances, you need to submit your circumstances to God's control. You've got to come to a place where you recognize my circumstances don't control me. They don't control me. No matter what's happening around me, my inner peace and my joy is not circumstantial. It's not controlled by the events that are taking place around me. And when I can't control my circumstances, I've got to yield them to God's control. Now, let me just remind you again what I said last Sunday. Though things may seem out of control in our world, God is still in control. Okay? Though things may seem uncontrollable, God's still in control. But listen to me, and you need to hear me, because this is a principle that can change your life. You need to understand this. Though God's in control, he's not a controlling God. You're going to have to make decisions, and you're going to have choices, and you're going to have to make the right choice. As he did with Israel, he set before them life and death, and then he said, choose life. So he's in control. The kingdom of God is going to reach its destiny. It's just a question, are you going to be a part of that? So although he's in control, he's not a controlling God, and he will respect your decisions and your choices. You've got to make the right choices. Our text is in Philippians chapter 4, verses 10 through 13. I'm going to read it to you this morning out of the NIV. The Apostle Paul, writing to the church of Philippi. Now, everyone look at me. Listen to me. We'll touch on this a little bit more later, but I want you to listen to him. I want you to remember this as you read these words. The Apostle Paul is writing this letter from a prison cell. Interesting. I rejoice greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I'm not saying this because I'm in need, for I've learned to be content. Say content. Whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. Verse 13, I can do all things through Christ. I can do all things through Christ. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Of course, we'll title this, Under No Circumstances, Part 2. The key verse here this morning is verse 11, where he said, content, whatever the circumstances. And as you know, the word content there means independent of external circumstances. Independent. I'm independent of the things that are happening around me. And so again, today's life lesson is this: when you can't change your circumstances, you need to get out from under them. When you can't change them, you've got to get out from under them. You've got to stop allowing your circumstances to weigh you down. You've got to quit allowing your circumstances to push you down and bring you into a place of discouragement and depression. You've got to get out from under those circumstances. There are 2 points that I have for you this morning, and then we're going to pray, and I'll be done. The first one is this. Let's talk for just a minute about coping mechanisms dealing with life's disappointments. Now, as with this project, with the state of Texas in front of our church, things for just a minute are going to get worse before they can get better. But just hold on. Coping is the ability to manage or to master and navigate through the circumstances of life in a healthy and productive manner. Now, everyone on campus and those of you watching online, you need to hear me. You're going to have to, in the coming days, if we believe we're in Matthew 24, which is the days of sorrow, you're going to have to develop these coping mechanisms. You're going to have to learn how to deal with life. You're going to have to, in order to get through this in a healthy and productive manner. There are strategies that people use in coping. One is called problem-focused, solving and or impacting the situation. Situation comes up, you become a problem solver and you deal with it. The second one is emotion-focused, which means controlling and or managing our feelings or ourself. So it's like the serenity prayer. Change what you can, accept what you can't. So in some situations, I cope with it by solving the problem, okay? In other situations where I can't change it, then I've got to learn how to control my emotions and my feelings. As with the disciples on the Sea of Galilee, they became fearful because water was getting inside the boat and they began to sink. And from that, we learned things only sink when you let external circumstances become internal problem. You let things get on the inside, you're going to start going down. But you've got to learn to control your feelings, to control your emotions when you're in the midst of difficult situations. And that's something we've got to do. America, listen to me. People on the internet, listen to me. People today struggle. They don't have these coping mechanisms. And the problem is when we can't cope, either we solve the problem or we can't. And so instead of dealing with our emotions and dealing with our feelings, we become a victim. And suddenly, because we can't cope, what do? We start to medicate. And we're going to have to develop these coping mechanisms if we're going to deal with life. There are unhealthy coping methods. Chemical abuse, compulsive spending, emotional eating, emotional outburst, abusive behavior, and others. This is where America is today. America is struggling, coping with life, and so they go to these different methods to cope and to suppress their emotions or their feelings. Listen to just a couple of things. The National Alliance on Mental Illness. 1 in 4 college students is diagnosed with or treated for a mental health condition each year. 1 in 4. 8 in 10 students felt overwhelmed, and 45% felt things were hopeless. Are you listening to me? 45% of our college students feel like life is hopeless. That's where they feel. Almost 50% feel like things are hopeless. The Journal on Depression and Anxiety, 2018, 20% of 67,000 students experienced suicidal thoughts. 9% attempted suicide. Think about that. Listen to this, Psychology Today. Many students now view a C or sometimes even a B as failure, and they interpret such failure as the end of the world. I always thought a B was a reason to rejoice. And if I got a C, I figure, well, I'm all right. I'm going to slide by on that one. I wasn't always the best student in school, and I'm just going to get that out now. I was distracted by other things. But we look at this generation, and we find a generation that is struggling with coping. They can't cope. You know, we look at the generations, and you can see it, even in the Bible, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. With each generation, there was a digression. And when you look in the generations, whether it's the greatest generation, baby boomers, or X, Y, Z, Q, whatever's following after that, I don't know, I can't keep up. When you look at all that, you find that the further we get away from that great generation that went through the Great Depression, that went through World War I and II, Korea, Vietnam, as we get further and further away from that, we find that the coping skills in life go further and further down. The generations today can't cope. They don't know how to cope. And I don't say that in a condemning or critical way, because much of that problem, or much of that, is the result of the way we parented, we raised our children. We've gotten to the place now, we've been there for years now, where you go play t-ball or soccer and everybody gets a trophy. Well, children never develop the ability to learn how to lose and how to win. They never develop that coping mechanism of how to deal with disappointment. And let me give you a revelation. Life's going to be filled with disappointments. And you're going to have to learn how to cope with all of these issues that you're facing. Listen to a common trend in today's workplace. They're unable to work independently. They can't deal with problem solving. If they run up against an obstacle, they go to a manager. Well, why don't you pause and see if you can't solve that problem? I've gone to fast food restaurants before. Walk up to the counter, and they've got combo 1, 2, 3, 4, you got it all lined out. And walk up there, and they're ready. They're going to push that button. And I say, okay, give me a number 1, but hold the onion. You want it different than the way it is? Yeah, I really do. Manager, they can't figure it out how to give you something other than what the button does. Problem solving. You can't solve the problem. We're raising a generation, we have raised a generation of kids for 2 generations now that don't have the mental capacity to solve the problem. The next issue, common trend in today's workplace, refusal to work during normal hours. 9 to 5. They don't want to do that. They grew up on television, they grew up on the internet, and they want to work at midnight. And in some cases, I know that works, but the majority of them, it doesn't work. They don't like the structure because it's inconvenient to them. Another one, refusal to do entry-level tasks because it's undesirable. As I preached to you before, my old pastor, Brother Clinton, taught me, if you can't clean my toilets in my church, you can't preach in my pulpit. He didn't want to. He didn't have no time for you. Clean the toilets. Clean the toilets. Listen, undesirable. They don't want to do that. And there are others. It's just a trend that you see within the workplace. The broader trend is simply a declining resilience and the ability to cope with life's issues. Now, as I said, I'm not being critical or trying to condemn, but I'm just facing the reality where we are as a society. And there's contributing factors to this. One, they're shielded from negative consequences. Everybody gets a trophy. Line them up. Them babies, you love them. Every one of them. Every one of them. You know, they play a certain sport. Everybody gets a trophy. Everybody. Maybe you need to weed out some of these darlings that can't play sports. Maybe they're drawn into being a musician or some other activity. But we can't weed them out because everybody gets a trophy. I remember back in Ohio, Suzanne and I were pastoring, and we had a missionary come. His last name was Snell, and he was in the Asia country, and he was a missionary, been there for years. And he sat down with me, and before we went into service, and he said, Pastor, listen to me. I raised my children perfect. Now, he was telling the truth. Now, I'm not criticizing any of these things I'm going to list out. They're all good and necessary, and you should do them. But you have to do something else with it. But he said, I raised my children perfect. Daily devotions, Tuesday night family night, private, they were, of course, being missionaries, they were in private, they homeschooled. It wasn't a private school, he homeschooled. And so he said, I did everything perfect. Perfect. And he said, I took my two children, they were close in age. I took them, brought them back to America, and I put them in college. And when he said, when they got out of the car to walk up the steps of the college, he said, I did it. Perfect. He said within 6 months, one of them got into a relationship that destroyed their life, and the other one ended up in jail. And he told me, he said, Pastor, when you talk to parents, tell them this, do all the things you know you should do, but make sure you don't so isolate your children that they never have the opportunity to face temptation and trials under your watchful eyes, so you can help train them and teach them how to navigate through temptations and trials so they can come out healthy and whole. And when they get out from under your oversight, they can deal with the devil and everything he's going to throw at them. So do everything you know to do, but make sure you teach your kids coping mechanisms, how to deal with life and everything that it throws at them, shielded from negative consequences. The second thing that contributes to this is helicopter parents. You know what helicopter parents are? You hover. You hover over your children. You won't allow them to do anything, to experience anything. Now look, I understand. I watched over my children. Man, I watched over my children. I watched over my children. And I'm worse with my grandkids. Worse. We're getting ready to go snow skiing again. And last time we went, we took the two girls and put them in ski school, and they're going up, and they don't know it, but I'm behind them on the slope. Watching them. Same thing with Jude. When he was in ski school, I was back 100 yards watching, skiing on it. And if anything would have happened, I'd have went to jail. Watch over my babies. But you've got to allow your kids to learn how to ski, to fall down, to get up, to make mistakes, to deal with it. You've got to allow your kids to learn how to develop coping mechanisms. And then the last one is an overindulgent lifestyle. We have a generation of kids that's had everything given to them. They haven't had to earn anything. They haven't had to work for anything. Everything has been handed to them on a silver platter. It's the generation that inherited everything, just abundance. And so now these kids don't know what it's like to balance a budget, to do without, to live on a tight budget. And they're falling apart in our world because they're having to make sacrifices and do without, and they never had to before. We've got to allow our children the opportunity to work, to earn, to learn, to face disappointments, trials and temptations and tribulation. They've got to learn how to do this. And we do them an injustice when we try to shield them from everything. Developing resilience or the ability to cope with adversity is a critical part, a transition to adulthood. 2 Corinthians 4:8, though we experience every kind of pressure, we're not crushed. At times we don't know what to do, but quitting is not an option. We've got to teach our kids how to cope with life, and quitting is not an option. It's just not. You're not going to quit. You're not going to do it. You start something, you finish it. You've got to teach your kids a coping mechanism. I'm not going to let you quit. Life is going to be difficult. We're going to go through trials and tribulations. It's going to happen. Listen to me. If you crush a grape, it will decay in a matter of just hours and days. But if you crush a grape and you allow it to continue through the process, it will become wine that can last for 100 years. Your kids are going to experience a crushing in life. I wish I could save them from it. I wish I could save you from crushings and problems. But it's going to happen. Can't save them from it. But if you'll teach them when they're knocked down to get back up, if you'll teach them how to cope with disappointment, if you'll teach them when you're crushed what to do next, that crushing will develop a wine within their character that can last for hundreds of years. The problem is people are being crushed and they don't know what to do next. They don't know how to get back up. They don't know how to deal with disappointment and frustration. They don't have that coping mechanism. So here's your point. You don't know how strong you are until being strong is your only choice. I never knew how strong I could be until life threw its worst at me. And I had no choice but to become my best. You don't know. So we've got to have these coping mechanisms. My second point is you need to change your mind concerning your circumstances. You may not be able to change your circumstances, but you can stop allowing your circumstances to change you. Oh, man. That's good. That's good. I can't change what's happening in this world, but I don't have to allow it to change me. So I want to give you 5 mechanics of coping, real quick. Just 5, real fast. I'm going to go through them quick. And everybody said, I don't believe that. Number 1, expectations. John 16, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I've overcome the world. You see, the problem is we lose heart. Therein lies the problem. As you know, disappointment is unmet expectations. That's the problem. We've set our kids up for failure. We've created for them this Walt Disney World life. They've got everything they want, when they want it, how they want it. No disappointment. Everybody gets a trophy. No correction. No coping mechanisms. None of that. Live in a bubble, protect them, and then suddenly they're thrown out there in the real world and they're disappointed because disappointment is unmet expectations. See, here's the question you got to ask yourself. Do you have expectations that God and or people never agreed to? I see this all the time with weddings. A young couple gets together. They love each other so much they can just eat each other up. Just eat him up. And the problem is they come to the altar to make promises that they have no idea what they're making. And they got expectations. You see, Barbie has an expectation of what home is going to be that Ken never understood. And Ken has expectations of marriage and home that Barbie never understood because we were raised different. Barbie was raised playing house, Ken wasn't. So we come together and suddenly we've got to negotiate this new relationship. And the problem is that she has expectations of him and he has expectations of her that they never agreed to. And we do it with God. We have expectations of God that he never agreed to. And suddenly we get angry with God when our life doesn't turn out the way we just think it should. We get mad at God. Well, why did God let that happen? Well, why isn't God doing this? Well, why isn't God doing that? And suddenly we get all upset with God because we have expectations that he never agreed to. He never agreed to do that. He never agreed. In fact, he warned you, in this life, you will have trouble. In this life, you're going to have problems. We want to live a problem-free life. We don't ever want anything to happen to us. We don't want disturbance. And when disturbance comes, we don't have the coping mechanics to deal with it. So I want to just give you the first point today of expectations. Your expectations will lead you to disappointment if you're not careful. Because Jesus said, in this world, you will have trouble. Number two, trust. Job 23. I want you to notice three things, and leave that on the screen, guys, while I cover this. He said in this one verse, but he knows the way that I take. Do you know that problems come by permission? I didn't say, listen, problems come by permission. Not all things, look, God don't create evil, but evil will come. God's not the one that hit Job, but he did allow it. Problems by permission. Number two, it went on to say, and when he has tested me. You need to remember this. He said, I'll never put more on you than you can bear. There's a load limit. But as I said earlier, you don't know how strong you can be until being strong was your only option. I'm a better man today for every trial that I've gone through. Every hit that I've taken, I'm a better man. And I could not be the man that I am today without the trials that I went through yesterday. Load limit. You find out what your metal is made of. And then he went on to say, I will come forth as gold. Now, if the two previous are true, then the third one is, and you need to look at circumstances and trials and difficulties as golden opportunities. Golden opportunities. I've been saying it to you now for a number of years. Let hell do its worst. Watch me become my best. It's a golden opportunity. Golden opportunity. Right now, I'm so sick of this pandemic, I could scream. But we've got to look at it as a golden opportunity that God will take the good, Romans chapter 8:28, he'll take the good out of it if we'll just let him. It's a golden opportunity. Every time hell hits you, you ought to say, oh, this is a golden opportunity. This is a gold. It's problems by permission. There's a load limit to it, and it's a golden opportunity for me to become my best. I'm going to be a better man tomorrow because of what happens today. You've got to know that. You've got to remember that all things are Father filtered, and nothing has caught him off guard. This pandemic didn't sneak up on him, and heaven got into a frenzy in 2020 because they didn't know what to do. Listen, you've got to know it's Father filtered. You've got to learn to trust God. Number three, we're talking about the mechanics of coping. Number three, resilience. 2 Corinthians 4. Though we experience every kind of pressure, we're not crushed. At times we don't know what to do, but quitting is not an option. Okay, you got to have resilience. Crush a grape, as I said earlier, crush it, and it will decay. Let it go through the process, and it will become wine that will last for 100 years. You see, here's the point. Bouncing back is what happens after you hit rock bottom. Yes. Bouncing back is what happens after you hit rock bottom. When you hit rock bottom, that's when you're going to bounce back. Listen to me. You've got to develop the ability to bounce back. My grandkids, they have this little rubber ball at my house, and I've got hardwood floors, and so they just love it when I take it and I throw it down as hard as I can, and it hits my ceiling. And I got high ceilings in my living room. It's probably 15, 16 feet. Seth's always over there helping me with something. I'm mechanically inclined, but I just want to give him an opportunity to learn things under my oversight. So I take that ball and I'll throw it down as hard as I can, and it'll go all the way to the ceiling, hit that ceiling. And they'll bounce back. They just laugh. They think it's the funniest thing in the world. It's the ability to bounce back, to be resilient. Listen to me. You need to have the ability to bounce back in life. You get knocked down, bounce up. Bouncing back is what happens when you hit rock bottom and you come back. There's no quit. You've got to learn to be resilient. As I said, crush the grape, it decays. Crush the grape and let it bounce back. Let it continue in the process, and it produces wine that will last for 100 years. You've got to have resilience. And today, as I mentioned earlier, I'm so concerned about America and our society because we're losing that ability to bounce back. We're not able to deal with disappointment and realities in life. We've got an answer for everything. You know, I'm about ready. I'm so sick of TV because every commercial is about some pill you need to take. The baby boomers are retiring and they know it, and that's where the money's at. And so everything's about medicine. You can inject this, or you can rub this on, or you can take this pill, and your wrinkles will go away. Your fat will disappear while you sleep. Hair will grow back. I've been watching that one. It ain't working. But there's always some pill or some cream or some, it's amazing. The number of every commercial says about drugs or something to make you look younger, live longer. It's just all this stuff. And because we can't cope. We don't know how to cope with getting older. The baby boomers especially, they want the fountain of youth. Well, let me give you a revelation. You're going to get older, and things are going to start to wrinkle. Things are going to start sagging, and one day you're going to die. Now, I know that's not an encouraging word, but I'm just telling you, the Bible says it's appointed unto man wants to die. You're going to die. So you can inject all that Botox you want. Your lips can get as big as an inner tube, but I'm just telling you, don't know where that came from. Eventually, you're going to die. So we've got to start, listen, instead of selling all that junk to the baby boomers, maybe we need to start talking to them about how to die. There's a good way to die. Starting well is important. Running well is important. But finishing well is important. How to die. We don't talk about that anymore. But deal with your fear of death now so when it comes, you're good to go. Paul said it, my time has come. My time has come. I'm ready to go, to be absent from the body, to be present with the Lord. Listen, we've got to learn how to deal with death. But the problem is we can't because we don't know how to deal with life. Resilience. Oh, Jesus. Hold on. Number 4, contentment. We're talking about the mechanics of coping. Philippians 4. I'm not saying this because I'm in need, for I've learned to be content whatever the circumstances. Now, we touched on this last week, so I'm going to hit this one and go. But the word content, as you know, means independent of external circumstances. Independent. He said, I've learned to be content of what's, in all circumstances, I'm good. Where there's lack or abundance, I'm good. I'm content. Okay? In our text, remember this, Paul writes a theological discourse on freedom. He writes a theological discourse on freedom from a prison cell. Now, can you appreciate what he said? I've learned to be content in whatever my circumstances. And the presidential suite of the Marriott or down in this prison cell, all the same to me. It's okay. Freedom and contentment is not circumstantial. Now, that's really not the right application of that word circumstantial, but you know what I'm saying. It's not subject to my circumstances. My peace, my joy, it's not circumstantial. It's not. That's where we got to get. We're in the Marriott or in the prison cell, I'm good to go. If I have abundance, I have lack. I'm hungry, I'm fed. It's okay. I'm content. Because of him, I am content. My last one, perspective. An eternal perspective should determine timely decisions. An eternal perspective should determine, influence, impact my decisions that are made in time. I should live my life with an eternal perspective. Every decision that I make, I should ask the question, how will this impact eternity? You start doing that, and you'll cut out some of that stupid stuff we're doing. Some of them foolish things that we do. If I have an eternal perspective, if I have an eternal value, it will impact my timely decisions. Romans. We are convinced that every detail, notice that, of our lives is continually woven together to fit every circumstance, every situation is being woven to fit into God's perfect plan. God's perfect plan. What is God's perfect plan? Of bringing good into our lives. For we are his lovers who have been called to fulfill his design purpose. Notice that. Details, plan to do you good to fulfill your design purpose. Your design purpose, not mine, yours. Your purpose is unique to you. Custom design, just for you. Now, I want you to notice, guys, put it back on the screen. Notice this, what's underlined, to fit into God's perfect plan of bringing good into our lives. Now, I want you to keep your eyes on that while I say this. God is gooder than our religion will allow us to believe. Gooder is not a word, but it works for me. God is gooder than what your religion will allow you to believe. Even in his rules and regulations, those things were given to take us into that which is gooder. Oh yeah. When God set that before Israel and he said, life and death, choose life. He's trying to say to them, listen, I've got something good for you. So let me encourage you to do that. Don't do this. Everything that God does, rules, regulations, everything, do's and don'ts, everything is God in his nature trying to move you to that which is gooder. God is gooder than what our religion would allow us to believe. We just can't believe it. We just can't. God is a good God, and he's good all the time. Oh my goodness. Instead of using your faith to control uncontrollable circumstances, use your faith to control your feelings and your perspective in your circumstances. Oh my God. We get all in a frenzy about all this out here, all that's going on. And we get on the internet and we start attacking each other. And we start eating our young. And we're out here just dividing and tearing down. We just all this mess going on. And we don't understand that instead of worrying about the fear of a pandemic, we need to be careful about a pandemic of fear. We out here. You got to control all this uncontrollable nonsense. When you should be using your faith to control your feelings, your emotions, and your perspective. We're going to pray about things. We're going to pray about them. We're going to intercede. We're going to stand in the gap and make up the hedge. But at the end of the day, I know that God's in control. God's in control. So here we go. Change your mind, and you will change your circumstances. I didn't say that you'd erase them. You change your mind, and you'll change your perspective of your circumstances. Change your mind. You may not erase the pandemic, but you'll change your perspective of it. Change your mind. And you may not change Russia invading the Ukraine, but you'll change your perspective of it. Change your mind, and you'll change your circumstances. Change your mind. You may still get fired, but you'll change your perspective of that. One door closes so God can open another. Change your mind and you'll change your circumstances. Change your mind. Everything, like the birthing of a baby, it comes head first. You got to go head first. Your actions will follow your thinking. Change your mind. Your actions are wrong because your thinking is wrong. Change your thinking. As a man thinks in his heart, so shall he be. Change your mind and you'll change your circumstances. Change your mind and you'll change the way you react. Change your mind and you'll change your actions. Stephen, come help me. So, today's takeaway for tomorrow's circumstances. Number one, you don't know how strong you are until being strong is your only choice. God, I may tweet that one myself. Number two, when you can't change your circumstances, just change your mind. So repeat after me. I got 3 of them. Repeat after me. Today I'm coming out from under my circumstances. Next one. Repeat after me. Circumstances don't control me. Third one. Repeat after me. Circumstances, I've changed my mind. God, Jesus. Just go out there and tell the pandemic, I've changed my mind. Go out there and tell hell, I've changed my mind. The doctor gave you a bad report. Go out there and tell cancer, I've changed my mind. I shall not die, but I shall live and tell of the goodness of the Lord. Go out there and just tell hell, the devil, tell the world, I've changed my mind. You may knock me down, but you can't knock me out. There's no quit in me. I'll throw your worst at me and watch me become my best. Just get up and tell the devil and hell, I've changed my mind. I'm not going to quit. Now, Charmaine texted me a word this morning that she got while in prayer in the intercession upstairs. I want to read it to you, and then we're going to pray for you. She said, in interceding for the service right now in the intercessory room, I keep hearing, I've given all those circumstances an eviction notice. And it's not, as I said, sometimes it's not that you change your circumstances, you change your perception of your circumstances. Okay? I've given an eviction notice, I changed my mind. I am the righteous judge, he said. Nothing will stop my kingdom from coming forth. God's in control. Awaken, arise in the authority I've given you. That's where you got to make a choice because God's in control, but God's not controlling. Awaken and arise in the authority I've given you. I believe a new dimension of glory. And remember, glory, it has to do with the weightiness of God's personality. It has to do with who he is. When his glory comes into a room, it's a revelation of who he is. It's honor to him. It's his personality. So a new dimension of glory or a new dimension of God's goodness will be released today to push us into a new authority and hope for our future. So we're going to pray for you. But I want you to, I added this in the office this morning here at the last minute. The word circumstance is made up of 2 words. Circum, which means to surround, and stance, which means to stand. So there's a lot of stuff surrounding you, and it's standing up against you. Circumstances. But you can't always change those things. Sometimes they're unchangeable, uncontrollable, and can be unbearable. Can't change them. But you can change your mind and change your circumstances because God is still in control. And you've got to have these coping mechanisms. You've got to be able to bounce back. You've got to stand up in the face of that which is standing against you and say, I won't quit. You may knock me down, but you can't knock me out.